Hello my friends, today we're making some Kenyan themed Pokemon. If you're new to the channel, we've created a number of African Pokemon before, so you may want to subscribe for more. And jingling that victory bell while you're at it to be notified when new videos are published. So I have a feeling that most people probably expect my Kenyan Pokemon to be based on some of Africa's famous safari animals like lions, elephants, giraffes, etc. But f*** all that noise. Any random artist can make a lightning lion, a rock elephant, and a psychic giraffe. I'm not saying those Pokemon are bad. In fact, I'm a big fan of Girafarig in its new evolution. But Red Spirit Mask goes deeper than all that. When I design a Pokemon, I don't think about animals or types or all that standard. First thing I think about is what African art and cultural element can I reference for my designs. Only after that do I consider animals, types, and etc. But yeah, warning to those fans who hate on humanoid Pokemon, half the mons in today's video are humanoid. And guess what? Humanoid mons have been in the series since the beginning, okay? So get over it. Now with today's Pokemon, I was looking through the book The Peoples of Kenya by Joy Adamson. This book primarily focuses on the traditional dresses and adornments of the various ethnic groups of Kenya, but other arts are documented as well. And although I may use clothing for inspiration in a future design, I decided to go with something a little different. On page 315, the author begins talking about a Duruma witch doctor who is depicted in this painted portrait, and this particular witch doctor showed the author some of his drawings. Now it should be noted that this book was made during colonial times, so this African artist decided to take advantage of one of the things that the colonists brought with them, that being paper. I know some fellow artists will probably cringe at the fact that these drawings were made on white lined paper, but remember this was colonial times, and lined paper was likely the only paper this old man could buy. So slap that 2023 cringe off your face because you gotta consider the historical context of it all. Anyway, the first Pokemon I'm showing today was based on a drawing called the Spirit of Trembling Illness. A lot of art in traditional cultures are made for supernatural reasons, and these drawings are no exception to that standard. This witch doctor believed that giving a person medicine was not enough to cure them of a disease. The patient should have the image of the spirit of the illness under their head as they sleep. Doing so would cast the demon out of the patient's body. This practice reminds me of another form of East African drawing, which we briefly mentioned in a previous video about the Zamorao healing arts. In that video, we learned that a Zamorao medicine man could identify the cause of someone's sickness by making a sand drawing. So knowing that, I can't help but wonder if this Duruma witch doctor perhaps used to make his curative drawings in sand in the past, which then begs the question, why did he switch to paper? Maybe just for convenience? Who knows? Unfortunately, this book has no answers for the questions it inspires in me. Getting back to the Pokemon, since it's based on a disease, the type of our new Pokemon is obviously going to be Poison type. And it would be a very powerful Poison type too, because according to the book, the Spirit of Trembling Illness is in fact malaria. Yes, that's right, the thing you've been looking at is in fact a personification of one of the most deadly diseases known to man. Pretty wild, huh? Whenever I get around to making a top 10 list of African monsters, more than likely this guy will be on there, because the monster of malaria is quite real, and now you all know what the disease looks like in the mind of a Kenyan. Here's the final version of this new Pokemon. I named it Tetemaka, which is Swahili for tremble. Instead of being represented with two figures like the original drawing, I felt it made more sense for our Pokemon to be only one being. I also want to note that my version is not holding spears with its hands, rather its hands are spears, similar to how the new Pokemon Kleavor has axes for hands. Next up, I made a Pokemon based on the Spirit of Leki Mungo, and I decided to make it an evolution of our previous Pokemon simply because it just makes sense based on the stylistic similarities they share. Now you might be wondering, what sickness does Leki Mungo represent? Well, that's a good question. I'd like to know that myself. But like I stated earlier, this book inspires many questions that it does not answer. So, I of course checked online for the spirit of Leki Mungo, and I found exactly one result. Well, one good result. A paper called A Socio-Historical Perspective of the Art and Material Culture of the Mijikenda of Kenya, written by Dr. Elizabeth C. Orchardson. Unfortunately, she also doesn't have an answer. She simply comments on what Joy Adamson wrote. Though, Dr. Orchardson does help to clarify some stuff. For example, even though these drawings are photographed in black and white, Joy does mention that these drawings were done in red and blue ink. Joy assumes the colors were not a deliberate choice, but according to Dr. Orchardson, who by the way has more credentials than Joy has, she explains that the old man likely picked these colors on purpose because these colors are commonly used in a ritual context. Next, I should probably state two observations that Joy had about the art. According to her, the designs on the drawings correspond to those found on old grave posts she saw at a Chonyi settlement, which makes sense considering the fact that the Chonyi and the Duruma are both groups within the larger ethnic group known as the Mijikenda. The next observation she makes is about how he handles the perspective of the human figures. Quote, "He achieved this by drawing the head and the extremities in profile and viewing the rest of the body from the front, as in Egyptian art, which he could not have seen." End quote. Now, longtime viewers of mine know that I don't mind pointing out possible connections between Egypt and sub-Saharan Africa, but in this case, I don't really think much of this observation that Joy Adamson makes. I mean, for one, she says the heads are in profile view, but they aren't. They just aren't. What the f*** is she talking about? But even if we were to give her some leeway and assume that some of the other figures she saw did have the heads in profile view, I still don't think it would be very reminiscent of Egyptian art. Again, I want to state that sometimes Egypt and sub-Saharan Africa are indeed connected in certain ways, but some people out there try to make everything be about Egypt, and that can get a bit annoying. The peoples of Africa are plenty capable of coming up with their own ideas without the help of Egypt. Dr. Orchardson mentions Adamson's comparison to Egypt, but she doesn't give her opinion about it, which is kind of a letdown since it probably would be worth hearing what her thoughts were on the matter. By the way, remember when I said this would be an evolution of Tetemaka? Well, I changed my mind, and I made it the younger form of the two, which is why I erased the former design. So with this angle, it's basically levitating, and I figured with this more dramatic angle, it would allow me to make the eyes more expressive and cute. The reason for the change was that I feel like Tetemaka looks more violent, and I figure that whatever sickness Leki Mungo represents, chances are it's less harmful than malaria. This new Pokemon of mine will bear the same name as the thing that inspired it because Leki Mungo sounds good to me, so no need to change it. Alrighty, from here we can finally move to the regional variants of Ekans and Arbok. Charbok! These new designs are based on a third drawing by the Witch Doctor that depicts a snake. More specifically, it's called the Spirit of Snakebite. So the illness this drawing cures is pretty straightforward. Venomous snakes are of course a big concern in Africa, and in fact some Africans, like the Himba, wear anklets as a way to protect themselves from snake bites. And that's because the lower leg is the most common target for snake attacks. In the illustration, if you look closely, the snake was drawn with tiny legs. Clearly the old man has seen many snakes in his lifetime because, believe it or not, vestigial legs on snakes are a real thing. While we're on the topic of serpents, it's worth mentioning that during Joy Adamson's time with the Duruma people, she met with several traditional healers, and one of them specialized in snake bite healing primarily. If you're wondering, the snake mask he's wearing is not made of snake skin, but it was made from some other kind of animal because Adamson notes that there is hair attached to it, and of course snakes don't have hair, so it must have been made from some kind of mammal. It's worth noting that I was trying to reference this snake mask in Arbok's design of its hood. If you don't know, the hood of a snake is that part of the neck that expands outwards. Anyway, besides that, I also put a little bit of Majora in there since I'm a huge Zelda fan after all. Going back to the text, the book goes on to point out that these two healers were in competition with each other, and both of them are seen holding carved wooden figures in their paintings, which represented spirits that each one of these traditional doctors consulted when they did their work. Besides the figure sculpture, the masked man has a plethora of other magical items, such as bells, horns, cowtails, and a gourd filled with pebbles. He also is, of course, wielding a spear, though since the book doesn't list it as part of his magical charms, I'm not sure if it was used for magic, but it might have been. Our previous healer also holds something in his right hand, that being a staff, which is topped with the image of a man and a woman. The purpose of this staff is not recorded, unfortunately, but it may also have been a magical tool. If you're wondering why I decided to cram both Ekans and Arbok's creation into the same part of the video, it's simply because I don't have as much details to share about the snake drawing as I did with the other two drawings. That said, I do want to point out that these regional variants of Ekans and Arbok will not only be poison type, but dragon type as well, because why not, right? Speaking of dragons though, that of course raises the question of whether there are any dragons in African mythology. Well, what counts as a dragon is clearly a matter of opinion, considering how different European and Asian dragons are from each other, plus a lot of people give the title of dragon to the Mesoamerican Quetzalcoatl. So considering how open and flexible the dragon category is, I would in fact say that Africa has dragons. I can think of two off the top of my head. One is a very large multi-headed serpent from an East African folktale that does battle with the hero of said story, and the other dragon is of West African origin and is a serpent that's so huge it holds up the earth itself. But I'm hoping to make separate videos about the stories that feature those mythical creatures, so I don't want to say too much about them right now. Sorry for the cliffhanger, but I don't want to cram two separate stories into the end of the video. But since I tend to take a long time to make certain videos, if you really want to read about these African dragons on your own, I'll let you know that the multi-headed serpent is from a folktale titled Rubia. The version I read does not give the monster a name. Luckily, the giant serpent from West Africa does have a name. It is Haida Wedo. Alright, let's now get back to the Pokemon and reveal the final versions of our regional variants of Ekans and Arbok. As you can see, like with our previous Pokemon, I stuck with reds and blues for colors to honor the color scheme that the old Duruma man chose. But for sake of variety, I decided for Ekans to be mostly blue and Arbok to be mostly red. Also, you can now better see what I was saying about making Arbok's hood resemble the snake mask a bit. So, did you like today's Pokemon? I'm sure some people found my choices to be pretty weird, but to be frank, I like being weird. Also, I really wanted to avoid using stereotypical animals that come to most people's mind when they think of Africa. That said, I'm not opposed to making Pokemon based on those animals like the lions, giraffes, and elephants that I mentioned previously. It's just that there has to be a good cultural reason to do so. Alright, that's all for today. Remember, we got more Pokemon and other video game content on the channel, so please subscribe for more.